Pastor Ed here with Daily Devotions for Wednesday, April the 30th, 2025, the last day of the month. And as I think I might have suggested yesterday, I'm going to kind of stick with the passage that we had yesterday. I'm going to concentrate more on the second half of it, verses 6 through 9 of Deuteronomy chapter 6, that reads as follows. Hear, O Israel, the Lord is our God, the Lord alone. You shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your might. That's became known as the Great Commandment, the Shema, which is a transliteration of the Hebrew word meaning hear, and it became a kind of a basic statement for the Jewish people, a confession of faith, if you will. But then we also read yesterday the verses that follow. Keep these words that I'm commanding you today in your heart. Okay, so love the Lord your God with all your heart and soul and might. Keep those words in your heart and then recite them to your children. Talk about them when you're at home, when you're away, when you lie down, when you rise. Bind them as a sign on your hand. Fix them as an emblem on your forehead. Write them on the doorposts of your house and on your gates. And so again, this confession of faith that there is one God, and that God's people believe that they should love God in response to God's love with all our soul, might, and strength, and heart. Viktor Frankl was a Jewish psychiatrist who was arrested by the Nazis in World War II, was put into Auschwitz, the famous death camp, stripped of everything, property, family, possessions, including a manuscript that he had spent years researching and writing about finding the meaning in life. The manuscript had actually been sewn into the inside lining of his coat. But he wrote of this experience, it seemed as if nothing and no one would survive me, neither a physical nor a spiritual child of my own. I found myself confronted with the question of whether under such circumstances my life was ultimately void of any meaning. Well, a few days later, the Nazis forced the prisoners to give up what little clothing they still wore. I had to surrender my clothes, he said, and in turn inherited the worn-out rags of an inmate who had been sent to the gas chamber. Instead of the many pages of my manuscript, I found in the pocket of the newly acquired coat a single page torn out of a Hebrew prayer book, which contained the Jewish prayer, Shema Yisrael, Hear, O Israel. The Lord your God is one God, and you shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your might. He writes, how should I have interpreted such a coincidence other than a challenge to live my thoughts instead of merely putting them on paper? He later reflected on his ordeal in his book, Man's Search for Meaning, saying, there's nothing in the world that would so effectively help one to survive even the worst conditions as the knowledge that there is meaning in one's life. He who has a why to live for can bear almost any how. And so that confession of faith became extremely meaningful to him. And again, what that passage talked about was the need. The phrase we used yesterday was pass it on, to pass it down. We used the example of a Olympic torch, passing the torch on, and figuratively thinking in terms of passing on the faith to the next generation. But someone came across the fact that that's easier said than done, perhaps. And I read about a 10-year-old boy who wrote to his pastor, Pastor, my father says that I should learn the 10 Commandments, but I don't think I want to because we have enough rules already in our house. That one wasn't as bad as an 11-year-old who wrote, Dear Pastor, I liked your sermon on Sunday, especially when it was finished. The point is, we can laugh about those things, but teaching the next generation is probably more difficult than we imagined, than just getting biblical names and events right, or understanding, the biblical storyline. Apparently, someone once wrote a piece called "Choosing Their Religion," subtitle, Not All Teens Reject Truth. Some are tailoring it to fit their lifestyles. call it iPod religion. And then it went on to say that today's teens can program their iPods to play only the songs they like. We all do this, though, too, right? The bypassing the record company executives, the radio programmers. So it's hardly a surprise then that many people, including teens, are forming their religious worldview with the same mentality, picking and choosing among things that they like and leaving other stuff, maybe some of the hard stuff, behind, largely without the benefit of teachers and pastors and parents. A culture in which a person's personal choice is supreme, and what's right for you is right, period. An 19th century theologian once had said this about teaching the faith to children. He told the story of having a dinner guest who was not a believer, and during the meal, this dinner guest expounded on the virtues of freedom of choice and how religion prevented people from being truly free. And he was especially upset with how parents try to train their children in the faith, claiming that kids should be free to believe whatever they want to, outside any influence from their parents. Well, afterwards, this theologian asked his friend to come outside with him to take a look at his garden. He was apparently known as an expert gardener, so his guest was expecting to see these beautiful flowers and sculpted shrubbery, flowering plants. Instead, all he saw were weeds everywhere, out-of-control vines, general disorder. Everything was overgrown. And the dinner guest looked puzzled, said, "This is your garden? What happened?" And he responded, "Well, I just took your advice. I wouldn't want to impose myself on these young vines. I just let them grow the way they wanted to." Interesting thought. You may have heard of the actor Martin Sheen, and you may know of him as I do, as a very deeply religious man. Apparently, though, as a young man, as a young actor, he was kind of wild. And when he started his family, and when his son Charlie, in particular, has led a pretty wild life of his own, whereas his father kind of returned to his roots in terms of the religious faith. Charlie didn't, because he really didn't get them from his father. Martin Sheen is filled with remorse and worries that he learned to be a father too late. He particularly regrets his failure to share his faith. "I never lost my faith," says Martin Sheen, "but I felt for a time that I had outgrown the church. Now it is a bone of contention in my soul that I did not share my faith with my kids as my parents did with me. It was a source of grace when I needed it. I have been greatly nurtured and inspired by my faith." It's important. It was important enough for the book of Deuteronomy to make that point, to remember all these things, not just for yourself, but to recite them to your children and pass them down. I referenced the book. It's going to be almost 50 years old now, Will Our Children Have Faith, by the educator John Westerhoff, and also told the story about the young boy who's asked by the priest, "Why do you believe in God?" And the boy said, "I don't know. I think it runs in our family." We have a responsibility as adults, as adult Christians, to pass the faith on, but especially and particularly as parents, to do our best to pass the faith on to our children. And makes me take pause too. Did I do enough as a pastor for my own children? And that's a question we all have to ask ourselves. Well, we'll move on to something else tomorrow, but wanted to share those thoughts yesterday and today with you, and hope you have a great day, and we'll be back at it again tomorrow. Until then, take care. Bye.